This podcast is recorded on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam peoples.
British Columbia, I've seen your mountains high, seen your pretty rainbows and your blue crystal skies, watched your winding rivers as they flow around the bend. To me you're not a stranger, you'll always be a friend.
Coming to you from the West Coast, this is Politicos. Today is February 19th, 2026.
I'm Scott Lundeboom.
And I'm Ian Bushfield. It's always tiring when I record two podcasts in one day, but at least Cambria Report's already on the air, and I already have that published, so as soon as I finish this, I can just turn my brain off. But we have lots to talk about. We got a new provincial budget this week. We got a federal NDP leadership debate that I watched like 2 hours ago. And a few more seats have changed hands federally as Carney gets further and closer to his majority in the same week. Let's start here in BC after I remind you to go to patreon.com/politicos to support this show. So, we didn't get a throne speech, so Tuesday became the what is happening in this province question. We'd been teased that this is going to be a tough budget full of hard choices that makes Brenda Bailey very unpopular, and we got something.
Yeah, I struggle to see the hard choice here. I mean, other than like a couple changes to the tax code, which is gonna, raise a little more revenue, and like there will be a few people who are mildly annoyed by it. There's very little in here that screams tough choice. We're doing the necessary but politically unpopular thing because that's what the province needs. It, in many ways, just feels like a very stay-the-course budget with a shockingly big top-line deficit number. And much like last year's, you're kind of looking at that and kind of scratching your head going, there's not a huge amount new here. Why does this number keep getting a lot bigger than the previous year?
It's a budget that makes no one happy, is what I think I read Mark Lee from Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives describe it as. I think it got sold in a way, I can't tell if it got changed between when they were kind of floating we're going to, this is going to be a tough budget and what we got, or if it was like they were just trying to
think it's going to be a giant,
or they just wanted to set
change,
expectations so badly, right? And then it's like, oh, actually it's just, we didn't cut healthcare. Well, it's like, okay, that's probably good, but like, what are we doing? Like, we raised taxes a little bit, but not enough to solve the problem. We don't have a clear path. The deficits get smaller.
In theory. But, when has the previous deficit estimation ever been accurate? So, for comparison, these budgets, they project out 3 years in the future. So if you go back to the 2024 budget, which was the first one that projected for this current one, the deficit was going to be less than half of what it was at a mere $6.3 billion. So you do have to wonder how much thought you can actually put into that declining number. And as far as I'm concerned, like, that isn't really worth anything after the current fiscal year, because next year they're going to be back here with a whole bunch of new stuff that is going to have more expenses coming out of the provincial coffers.
So let's put some numbers out there. The province is hoping to bring in about $85.5 billion in revenue, spend about $98.8 billion on operating costs, and spend another $18.7 billion in capital spending. This will have a operating deficit of $13.3 billion, and the debt will be, I don't have the amount it increases, but it's $116.5 billion at the end of this year, and it will increase to $189 billion after 3 years. That, for comparison, gives us a deficit to GDP ratio of 2.9% this year. They say they're going to decrease that to 2.3% over the plan. And the debt to GDP forecast is going from 26.1% for this year to 37.4% by the end of the plan. And they say that's doing better than Ontario and Quebec, and most provinces at least.
Yeah, I mean, those two have famously been fiscal basket cases for at least decade and a half, 2 decades at this point. So, it's not exactly a resounding statement of confidence that EA were less of a fiscal disaster than Ontario and Quebec are.
What do we get for that? We get, like you say, stay the course. There's a bit of money for education. It seems like to keep up with inflation and population growth. Actually, they say K-12 will decline in number of students over this fiscal plan in a couple spots. So we're expecting fewer young people, which should be a big red flag. One would think that should be setting off alarm bells like, hey, kids are our future. We're going to have fewer of them.
Yeah, that's like one of those long-term things that absolutely does not get enough attention. The long-term demographic trends in this country are bad. Most Western countries are pretty bad. And it's not terrible in the education sense right now because, if spending's continuing to increase, we're probably getting more per capita student spend on that. But where it's really going to show up is healthcare with an aging population and the dependency ratio shifting in a big way towards the bad side of that equation. And I hear some conservatives talk about this, but there's like very little conversation about the general demographic trends of the country, and that ought to be raising alarm bells because there's very long lead times on this, even if you can get an effective policy response, which just surveying the globe has proven very challenging. But, you need to do it before it gets worse. And not anything here, not anything in discussion as far as I can tell for the most part.
Well,
level of politics.
The mitigating factor Canada has had for a long time was immigration. But we swung hard against that in the last couple of years, and our targets have gone way down, and that's where suddenly, we are expecting population decline, and that's going to make a lot of economic indicators harder.
Just to clarify, it was like a 1-year population decline from not renewing a bunch of temporary statuses. The permanent resident immigration path still has us on a growing trajectory. It was a 1 to 2 year correction that saw the flat population growth.
And here we have declining student ratio numbers that we'll have to account for. The amount that translates to is about $600 million new money for education and $2.8 billion for health over 3 years. A bit of money for healthcare, $330 million, basically to just keep childcare running the way it is. We're not opening any more $10 a day spots. We're just like, if you got one, you're a winner. We're hoping the feds show up at some point. That's our plan. And then the only other major spending on social services was the childhood disability supports we talked about last week, which is about $475 million over 3 years to shift the model. They had a big section on public safety, but all in, that's about $139 million over 3 years. They could have gone really big here with Tumbler Ridge so fresh in our minds, but I know
I think that would be tough.
It's tough
for
to
2
turn.
reasons.
It's tough to turn it around that fast, right?
Well, 3 reasons then. It's tough to turn it around that fast. You do have to do it carefully too, or it's going to look very crass and opportunistic. And also, it's not necessarily clear where you can, in a short time frame, throw a big number at it in a way that's likely to have any results. As we learn more, I'm sure there will be more discussion about the fact that the shooter had been in and out of the mental health care system prior to it. But, what does that actually mean in terms of things you can put in a budget document that draws focus is a tougher question.
And we've known mental health care is under strain and underfunded for a long time. So, you could have thrown a bunch of money at it. And I think there's a bit in here, but it's still hard to say what our, we're not envisioning going to a system where accessing a psychiatrist is as easy as going to a family doctor, which is tough to find, but free. So where's the vision, I guess? The final section in the spending is business investment. There's a bunch of like small things, a bit of money for skills training, a little bit of talk of increasing permitting efficiency, and a pool of $400 million to attract private sector investment. But even there wasn't like a signature anything. And so the whole budget on the spending side is, like you said, stay the course.
Well, push the number up, but stay the course in terms of more or less what you're doing, which has been what the last couple EB budgets have been like. Yeah, the deficit has shot up a bunch, expenses have shot up a bunch. Revenue is actually like remarkably on point compared to what we were expecting in the 24 budget. For that, there's only about a $900 million gap on that one. But yeah, like we're throwing a lot of money at stuff, and none of it really seems to do a whole lot at the end of the day. And there's no like signature politically. There's no signature policy you can point to, and a lot of this just feels like having to throw ever increasingly large sums of money at problems just to kind of tread water, where none of the big problems are like really getting solved in any way, just costing us a lot more to keep where we are. And nor does it really hit the big problems that the last year has really shone a light on. Like, you mentioned permitting stuff and a little bit around Stratton stuff, but for 2 budgets now, we've basically seen very little interest in, or very little focus and real weight behind economic development stuff. And that's actually an art criticism. You do level out a lot of NDP budgets, but the fact that hasn't really changed in the last year just highlights the deficit more there.
The other thing that's annoying and painful about this budget is the deficit remains so large despite a number of tax increases. And I think it's because each of the increases they are introducing are relatively minor. Like some bring in about $500 million a year, like the income tax increase, but taken together, they don't offset the new spending. And so we're still sitting around the 11 to 13 billion that we were teased in advance. So in terms of income tax, the lowest income tax bracket is going from 5.06% to 5.6%. So basically everyone will be paying more taxes, which is a wild choice. I'm not against it, but I was not expecting that.
No, I mean, that's probably one of the things that is the side that, they're most serious about their revenue side of the equation, was just doing a broad-based tax increase rather than, trying to play with the top tax bracket, which, looks impressive and you're really sticking it to the rich, but, there's not a lot of taxpayers in that top bracket. So the amount you raise on that is smaller than just doing the broad-based ones. And that's something I think the discourse in North America often forgets, is that the really big social democratic states of the Nordic countries, they fund that largely through just broad-based taxes on everyone.
And to be clear, it's not
like a
on
highly top-heavy tax system.
Yeah, and to be clear, it's not on everyone. They are increasing the tax reduction credit, so they're saying people making under $50,000 are pretty much exempt, and I think it's like 40% of British Columbians won't see their taxes go up. So it's about 60% of people. The other thing that's an interesting trick to do in here to increase taxes is they're going to pause tax bracket indexing for 3 years. So instead of the brackets increasing with inflation, if you get a raise, you will pay more taxes, basically, because the tax brackets will not increase and your salary will, hopefully. It's a kind of like hidden tax increase that opposition parties love to criticize governments for, because they're like, you tried to sneak that in, and it does bring in a good good chunk of money for an accounting trick, effectively. Our income taxes are still really low at the low end, especially. A lot of that goes back to, the big tax cuts Gordon Campbell brought in, and then the additional tax cuts he used to kind of offset the carbon tax. And so I think it's quite justifiable to increase this since we don't have the carbon tax anymore. And we can get back to realms where we have a more equitable tax system, or a more progressive tax system where, yes, middle income earners do pay more taxes, but that helps us fund our state. The only big problem is we're still running a deficit, so we didn't go hard enough.
Yeah. So
increase all the tax brackets by 0.5%, and boom.
Yeah, there's basically a $3.5 billion gap. The carbon tax took out. I'm using the projections I mentioned earlier, just the baseline for that one. And look at this. Basically, just glance at the top line revenue numbers. They've closed about $2.5 billion of it, so haven't really completely closed it. Oh, so there's the one-time tobacco settlement that I think got counted in this year, which would have made everything look worse without it, too.
Yeah, the other tax increases are a small increase, or a 1% increase to the speculation and vacancy tax. They're increasing that, what's called the additional school tax, but it's essentially the mansion property tax, the higher tax rate for properties valued between 3 and 4 million, or above $4 million. They're expanding the PST to more professional services and removing some exemptions like cable TV and landlines, things people don't have anymore.
Yeah, those all make sense. And on the professional services side, it doesn't make sense to have these weird carve-outs to the PST, and same thing with the stuff that, I get the argument for carving out essentials, but, landline stopped being essential a long time ago, and so changing some of those to just keep with the times makes sense. On the speculation and vacancy taxes, it's not a huge amount of the provincial revenue, which nor should it be. In theory, this is a tax that's designed to discourage behavior. So if you have it set right, the actual amount coming in is going to be pretty minor. And this change, they're projecting a total of $23 million a year extra coming in on it. So it's a pretty insignificant measure altogether. Which almost seems like it's more for the comms benefit than anything else.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes that's what you got to do. Like, hey, we're making sure the rich multiple homeowners are paying as well as you, middle class income earner. The other way they're helping defer some of the debt growth is by pushing back some capital projects. A lot of long-term care homes are going to be delayed. Expansion to the Burnaby Hospital and some student housing at University of Victoria. I've seen
in fact, a lot of housing stuff is
they actually
getting changed on there, and they've come up with this delightful new spin on it. They're not delaying; they are repacing the spending on housing.
Yeah, a lot of social housing. I think there was a big grant that they were going to award that just got. Yeah, we're not going to do that this year, which puts a lot of not-profit housing providers quite angry.
Yeah, some of the healthcare facility stuff got delayed as well with the repacing they're doing.
Yeah, and all of that has to be remembered against the strains that we still live in with our healthcare and housing situation. It's always cheaper to build 5 years ago. So there's the tough choices, I guess they're trying to justify is, sorry, grandma, your long-term care home wait is going to continue to be long, or is going to get longer. On the public sector side, they are planning to reduce the size of the public sector by 15,000 full-time equivalent over 3 years, which is not it's a lot of jobs, but in the grand scheme of the size of the public sector, I don't think it's a huge percentage. But I think, as we've talked about, like, a lot of the BC public sector is working in frontline healthcare and frontline education. And don't think you want to be the NDP government firing doctors and teachers. So
yeah, I'm curious how many doctors and teachers are actually going to be reduced by this. We talked about this a bit last week, but the overall number of public servants in the country, or in the province, has shot up quite significantly in the last 6 years. And, to use the same metaphor as just on the fiscal stuff, it feels like we're throwing more and more resources just to tread water on a lot of it. On a per capita basis, it also shot up quite a bit. So it's not just a case of we need it to keep up with the population growth. The actual number of public sector employees to residents has been climbing quite a bit too, and it's not clear there's been a lot of benefit in terms of the quality of frontline services as a result on there. So it really will be the case of who that $15,000 that's going to make a difference, because if you target it on the frontline service, it will. If you focus it elsewhere on the less productive parts, there you maybe see a larger benefit.
There's also a couple smaller cuts. They eliminated and they did this one rather quietly. I saw someone pull it out. The BC Training and Education Savings Grant. This is a small amount that if you open an RESP for your kid, you can apply for when they're like 6 years old, and that you get $1,200 contributed to their RESP. They note not many people used it, and it primarily benefits people who can afford to put a lot of money away for their kids. So I get those arguments, but this seems really much more like a case where if there's not a lot of uptake, the solution on that is to make it more automatic rather than cut it. Because one of the big benefits... Not if you don't like the project in the first place.
Yeah, but like one of the benefits to these accounts is that the contributions get invested and compound over the years, so that $1,200 actually turns out to be a lot more by the time the kid's 18 and deciding on which university to go to.
Yeah, but it's subsidizing people who can already afford to go to university versus we already have a number of other programs to offer low interest loans. Right?
The RESP can be used for more than universities.
Okay,
there's a wide range of educational stuff on there, but like the earlier you get it in there and the more widespread you make it, the better the benefit's going to be.
If you can afford, though. So, from an equity point of view, I think their focus on loans and grants and waivers from that end, which has been a big push in the earlier years, in the Horgan years, does let you spend the same amount but help people who probably need it a little bit more from their focus. The more controversial change...
Kind of ignore the compound on that, but we can move on.
The more controversial change in there, possibly, was that they are eliminating the Office of the Merit Commissioner. This is something I hadn't heard of.
Yeah, I might have vaguely heard about it when it got created, but I just said it's about one of the most low-profile commissioner positions in the government.
Basically, it exists to ensure appointments within the public service are fair and based on merit, i.e., don't do patronage appointments. They released a couple reports over the years. It's been around since 2001. And in the last couple of years, the commissioner has released a couple reports going, how many people have the educational qualifications that they're supposed to in the public service. And we haven't had a scandal out of it. It hasn't come out and been like, oh, all of these jobs are inappropriate. The office costs about $2.2 million.
Might be one of those things, though, where the fact that there is somebody keeping an eye on things has the deterrent effect to suppress that, because, governments, particularly ones that have been around for a while, where they figure out nobody's looking, they tend to do more shenanigans.
Is that a $2 million job, is the question. The government is, I believe, trying to move this into just like the general HR approach of the government. I don't know. The conservative opposition and some journalists are digging into this and trying to rake the government over it. I'm not sure if this has legs.
I feel like it's one of those things that it'll have a lot of legs if some impropriety is found later.
Mm-hmm.
If
the government starts to rack up scandals.
If it just becomes like, right? Yeah, if this just becomes a thing where they get, 2 weeks of bad press and then everyone moves on, it'll be, one more straw being loaded onto the camel's back, but not going to be a thing that anyone will point to come the next election as a reason to vote or not vote for the NDP.
Yeah. Like, we've been fairly spoiled provincially. Like, we haven't had major scandals. Like, there's been things to criticize about the Horgan and EB governments in policy ways, but like...
Yeah, in fact, since 2017, the biggest scandal is was what happened at the legislature. That was not a partisan thing at all.
Yeah, and that was more also the independent speaker was able to uncover wrongdoings as opposed to like the new government was causing them. So yeah, it's one of those offices that a new government creates when they want to differentiate themselves, but is it necessary forever? Maybe not. It's not like a fundamentally bad thing. No one's out there being like, yeah, they should be allowed to appoint their friends. It's just, it was very funny to me to watch people go, how dare they eliminate this position that I only learned existed 3 hours ago. Felt fake. In any case, that's the budget as a whole. Reaction to it was not great, whether you were on the side that wanted to see smaller deficits or the side that wanted to see bigger investments in social programs or in anything. Just like, I didn't see anyone come out and go, wow, good job.
No, not a single person did. That wasn't tied to the government and its political fortunes. And yeah, it just feels like another wasted opportunity more than anything else. And I don't know, we've heard like some good stuff out of EB and the government in recent months about kind of getting the ship in order and somewhat, but none of the stuff we see in here actually really shows any big move on any of that part. And I don't know, at some point the fact that just a lot more money keeps going out and not as much to show for it is going to catch up to this government.
As I saw a lot of different groups say, budgets are about choices, and in this case, they chose not to make any.
Yeah, it's also kind of interesting that, like, the last several budgets, there's not been, like, a headline item that anyone can really point to. And, the other thing that people say a lot around budgets is, budgets are communications documents. But the last couple, they've not really chosen to communicate anything with their budget.
What did they campaign on in the last election, Scott? Can you even remember?
Even like
a tax cut that they abandoned.
Yeah, and but like even when Harper wasn't doing a lot, he at least was like going hard on the message of steady hand on the tiller sort of thing, and we aren't even getting that out of the kind of stay the course, don't make any big moves from the NDP. Like there's not even that message that. We're in turbulent times. We need a steady hand on things, and we're not doing nothing's going to rock the boat, but that's good because we don't want the boat to rock. It's just not a lot of anything coming out of them in terms of how they're framing the budgets.
Well, besides the budget, they did have the chance to introduce a few new pieces of legislation this week. Since we didn't get the throne speech, this is the only way we know what they want to do is actually watching them do it. The bills were. First, on interprovincial trade, they also introduced bills to allow you to renew and replace your driver's license online and to strengthen oversight in international education. The interprovincial trade one's probably the most interesting. Basically just a mutual recognition of goods and services that can be sold in other provinces can be sold in BC, with caveats applying.
which is good. Like, it makes no sense to have 13 different regulatory agencies that all duplicate each other's work on a lot of this stuff, so great. There's already a move to do this for regulated occupation that's already gone into effect. Like, it just great on that front. And yeah, interprovincial trade barriers are a big problem, and it's a little ridiculous. We're finally getting to the issue in 2026, but yeah, any move in that direction is a good move.
The exceptions include our ability to protect environmental, consumer, health, safety, and other standards.
Which is
a lot.
Kind of broad. So broad, it might actually render it a little meaningless, though.
It'll also have exceptions applying to Indigenous people, monopolies, taxation, and incorporation requirements. So we'll see if this actually substantively does anything. I'm not actually sure how many goods can be sold in other provinces, but not BC. But sure. Allow you to renew your driver's license online is pretty self-explanatory. And the International Education Bill will basically formalize a lot of the processes of how the province accredits post-secondary institutions, and which ones can grant international study permits. If you're not approved, you don't get to issue study permits, which all seems like stuff that should be in law. And as far as I can tell, has been kind of the practice for a long time, but seems reasonable.
Yeah. The only thing that seems a little odd on that is the sketchy visa mill, international education, for lack of a better word, schools that popped up and became a problem. Like, the real crescendo of all that was a couple of years back. It seems like the government's reacting a little late to it, but nothing wrong with actually making the moves they're making the moves here for.
Yeah. Another thing I want to note in the legislature this week that was interesting is 4 private members' bills actually got reinstated. The way BC legislature works is every Christmas or New Year's, basically, they prorogue. So the bills that were on the order paper in the fall die, and everyone starts fresh in January or February when the House returns. But this is possibly the first time I've seen private members' bills reinstated. 3 of them had already received second reading, which, because we changed the private members' procedures, the standing orders, a couple of years ago, we can actually get private members' bills passed from the opposition or from backbench government members. And so it's interesting to watch those. Most of these are relatively uncontroversial. I don't think the Firefighters Health Act is going to divide partisan lines very much, nor the Dashboard Cameras in Commercial Vehicles Act. But the Professional Reliance Act, M216 from NDP MLA George Anderson, actually attracted quite a bit of controversy when he introduced it in the fall, especially from a lot of municipalities who didn't like his proposals. So that'll be one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, that's by far the most controversial one of it. I mean, my opinion, it's a pretty decent move, but it is no doubt going to cause controversy, both with the general anti-development crowd and municipalities on there. So basically what it does is, right now, when someone submits plans for a project to municipalities, they do their own reviews on it before they approve it. And this act would basically change it to, no, if the professional engineer and licensed architect stamp the plans and take on all of the associated liability with the design, that is considered sufficient, and the municipalities basically don't have to redo their work to verify that. And it also would exempt municipalities from any liability for approving those plans as a result, and shift all of the liability onto the licensed professional, which all seems reasonable. Like, what's the point of licensing the professional if you're not going to then rely on said professional and the quality of the work they're doing, and the professional regulators to ensure there's sufficient quality and expertise being employed.
Politically, it's very interesting. This is coming as a private member's bill as opposed to just a government bill, because I have to imagine he's talked to his caucus about this bill, and I don't know George Anderson. Maybe he's just really into professional reliance and the certification of these liabilities and things. Like, I understand what you're talking about, but like, why is this a private bill? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a little interesting that because this is something you could have seen a government taking it up and doing it as their own position move forward, especially as they've been going through and revamping, permitting and stuff. But you do have to wonder if this is the case where they're kind of happy not to put their stamp on it and kind of have a friendly face just shuffle it along as a private member's bill. For context, George Anderson, before entering politics, was a lawyer who also served as a Nanaimo city councilor and a regional director for the regional district of Nanaimo. So, potentially this comes out of his previous experience dealing with municipal issues.
Perhaps. So we'll keep our eye on that bill and what else is coming before the legislature. The other big question in the legislature is who's going to lead the opposition. And we got a little bit more information this past week as John Rustad sadly decided not to attempt to take his job back in a lengthy Facebook post. And Harman Bangu officially put his name in, even though everyone had known he was in the race. So
I had forgotten he wasn't officially announced yet, because this might be the worst kept secret in BC, was that he was interested in becoming leader of the Conservatives.
Yeah, so
in fact, I think we've talked about him several times when we've done roundups of who's in.
Yeah, Rustad doesn't give a concrete reason besides like reflecting on it and deciding what's best for the party and the province and all that kind of stuff. The stakes for British Columbians are too high for distractions, personality fights, or internal noise. But like, that's what we built this podcast on. John, do us a favor.
Also, that's what the last 6 months of conservative politics in BC have been about, including his very messy exit. Like, if that was the line, things would have happened a lot earlier.
Someone finally talked some sense into him, and I'm very disappointed. Anyway, they have 11 candidates for leader. That's not as many as in 2017 for the federal Conservative when they hit 13, 12 or 13.
It was 14 before O'Leary dropped out right at the end.
It's a messy amount. So good luck if they all stick around. We did get a poll this week from Palace Data suggesting Caroline Elliott and Daryl Jones are the front runners, but I think that's name recognition exclusively.
Yeah, Daryl Jones strikes me as odd on that one. Like, I could very easily believe Caroline Elliott is near the top of the pack when it comes to that 13-person list. Sorry, 11-person list. For that, Daryl Jones, though?
There were only 6 names on that list, too, plus another candidate, and 54% were undecided of Conservative voters. So, yeah, I mean, polling leadership races is always hard, and I'll throw the link in there if you want to look at the slide anyway. Let's jump, though, federally to the NDP leadership race, where, as I mentioned earlier, their English language leadership debate was held tonight in Metro Vancouver. I think it was in New West. All the leadership watches were near there. The debate itself was fine. Like, it wasn't bad. They weirdly included a French question in there. I think just...
Is that weird? Like,
it's
we
the
were talking
English
about
debate. We did a French debate already.
Oh, fair. But like, are the potential leadership candidates competent in French at all has definitely been like a recurring question that gets asked. So I didn't at least see the logic on that one.
No, yeah. And the question was from a Quebecer asking, how will you, rebuild the NDP in Quebec? And I didn't get a good sense of the individual candidate's French because it was overdubbed by someone who struggled through trying to understand what they were saying. And you could like visibly hear the frustration in the translator for some of the candidates. Like, I think Avi Lewis and Heather McPherson still had passable French. Everyone else struggled to different levels. In a follow-up question, they were allowed to like cross debate in English on the French question. And Tenille Johnston's like, I need at least a year to become passable in French. Like, I've spent so long trying to learn my people's own language that I know how long this takes and how hard. So at least she was like sincere and honest. Tony McQuail was like, I'm 74. I'm not going to learn French. We have translators. So credit for honesty there, Tony. My other takeaways from the debate is Avi Lewis has kind of established himself as the front runner through fundraising and just the general awareness. And I think he kind of went through the debate with that vibe, not taking shots at anyone, just trying to like talk to his plan, pay a compliment here or there wherever he could. If you like him, he did good. If you don't like him, you can find things to complain about. That's kind of always true. Heather McPherson didn't have any standout points. I felt her and Rob Ashton were a bit canned at times, like really relying on what they talked about with their consultancy and with their teams a lot, kind of going back to the same. Rob Ashton tried to pull out that, well, I was talking to this guy and that story of the fake average person that every candidate does at some point. Ashton took a couple shots at Avi. Those were the only like sparks that flew, but he didn't even like go hard at them. He was just like, well, there's one candidate on this stage who sank the Alberta NDP's re-election campaign. And it's like, you could be specific. Everyone knows what you're talking about. And then Avi,
does everyone know what they're talking about? That was quite a while ago. The younger generation probably does not actually know the details of that, except, the real nerds.
Yeah. And, Avi talked about the unions he worked with to develop the LEAP to try to defend it. And Rob was kind of given the chance to come back to it, but he let Tony interject instead. So he didn't even like land his critiques that strongly. On other elements, Rob Ashton was a bit shallow on what he would do besides listen like that. I'll get to be a bit shallow. I thought Tenille Johnston did really well, but like she's the most like personal and she can really talk well to a lot of the issues. So I think she has a bright future. When asked, in one word, are you planning to run for renewal of the party or to rebuild the party or to be prime minister? Everyone said rebuild except Tony McQuail said he wants to be prime minister. So
I mean, prime minister's 2 words, but
yeah, I mean, they were allowed to.
Yeah, the reality is the NDP needs to rebuild before they have a shot at being prime minister. And like, honestly, I don't think the party actually wants to be in a position to be prime minister. Unlike the provincial counterparts, the federal NDP seems to have a bit of a love-hate relationship with power, where they really seem like they feel more comfortable being on the outside critiquing than ever being in a position of power where they have to actually make hard choices and deal with the trade-offs and not be as pure as they could be if they were just the perennial outsider critiquing.
So, yeah, overall, I don't think this debate will change a lot of votes. I think Avi's main goal there was to make sure he has the down ballot support that if he doesn't win on first ballot, he will win on second ballot. And Heather McPherson was probably hoping she could get enough down ballot support that she might sneak in on a final ballot or something like that. Hence the friendliness of both of those candidates. But it was fine. There were little bits here and there. Oh, Tenille Johnston also would support free membership in the NDP and bringing back the per vote subsidy, which are 2 ideas I hadn't heard anyone talk about in that race. So, she had some substance to her discussions as well, and I hope she goes far in the party. The other party looking at shakeups is the Liberals, as this week they got kind of 2 surprises. First, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled from the bench on Monday that the Terrebonne election was invalid. Like last year's election result.
The one from April last year.
Yeah, where it was decided by one vote after the recount. And then there was a lot of back and forth after it came out that there was some irregularity, not necessarily any misdeed, but just enough like questions about mail-in ballots arriving at the right time.
Well, yeah, so for context, the irregularity was that an Elections Canada worker accidentally put his own postal code on the address to mail in the mail-in ballots for, and about 40 of them went out with the incorrect postal code, which resulted in the ones that were mailed in getting returned to sender, and then a woman in the riding came forward saying she got her ballot back and that she was going to vote for the bloc candidate that ended up losing by one vote on there. And so the irregularity was, by all accounts, just like an honest mistake by an election worker, but nevertheless one that, because it was so close, had an actual material effect on the outcome.
Yeah, and I think the Supreme Court of Canada understood that very well, and also understood that the election was 9 months ago, or whatever, 10 months ago, and that's unreasonable. So go do the election again. They vacated the seat on the spot. The Supreme Court is not known for making decisions quickly because they're supposed to think through them.
It's been this long. Like, what would have been the problem waiting a little bit longer? Because, like, that's ultimately my problem with this, is that, yeah, I could honestly see the argument for going either way, but regardless, we actually need finality in the elections in a period that is closer to 10 days than 10 months, and it is just insane that we are dealing with this in the middle of the following February from an April election. Like, this is no way to run a serious country, of kicking this one around for all that time. Like, there needs to be a process to get this sort of thing dealt with quickly. And, you know, if that means we need a provision in the Elections Act that like escalates this to the Supreme Court, 21 days after the vote or whatever, so be it.
I think what I'm hopeful will come of this is, because the Supreme Court issued like its interim decision, but it still has to write out its actual reasons. And hopefully those reasons give a sketch of, not to write the law for the government, but to at least say why we need to do this fast. It can be the exact same reasons you just said, just write the basic thing down and say it's unreasonable it took so long to get here for the purpose of preserving our democracy. Make sure, even if it just writes it in a thorough enough way that the next time this comes up, judicial reviews of the ballot don't get appealed, right? So that there is clarity enough in the law so that it doesn't have to be appealed, because that's part of what slowed this down. It shouldn't have taken so long to be heard at each level.
Yeah, well,
at least it got done in a year, but yeah.
Yeah, so the counter argument to this is that the Elections Act basically has a fairly high bar for invalidating an election, and a single election worker made a fairly minor data entry error, or not even data entry error, fairly minor typo on a few dozen forms. It's not enough to fundamentally change or require an election to be rerun. It's not a crazy one either, because you also don't want to get in the situation where every little single thing that could potentially have an impact then also becomes the basis of litigating the election result on it. And honestly, I would have been fine with this going either way, but just should not have taken this long. And yeah, I think Canadian democracy would have been more or less okay if the thing had been kept the way it was. Just if that decision had been made with finality several months ago rather than now.
And hopefully next time it happens,
Yeah.
which is infrequent. This is the first time in our lives that this has come up. But hopefully next time they make a decision faster.
We've had writings in our lifetime that have been decided with a coin flip because it has actually tied.
Yeah, at the provincial level. The end result of this is there needs to be a by-election in Terrebonne. That adds to the 2 other by-elections that have to come up. So in addition to that, we also had this week the MP who was supposed to be resigning, Matt Jeanneret from Edmonton, has now joined the Liberal caucus, which was where he was rumored to be going until he said, no, actually, I'm quitting. But now it's, gotcha. I'm a Liberal now.
Which, if I remember, I'm actually quitting was his family was moving to Victoria and they already bought a house and stuff, which makes the I'm gonna stick around for Edmonton a little odd. But I think there's a couple examples in the past year where people have decided that the time they want to spend with their family was not actually all that important. When
or being local to the constituency also doesn't matter in the case of one leadership, in the case of one leader at least. So that kind of, that puts Carney, I lost track, but I think he's 1 seat still away from a majority. Or is it still a couple now with the resignations?
The
such a mess.
CBC actually has a chart showing the ups and downs of the 2 main parties. So on election night, the Liberal caucus had 169 members, and as of today, it has 169 members. The thing is, that is because they now have 3 empty seats, and they were 3 higher before. 172 being the number needed for a majority. So, Freeland and Blair resigned. That brought them down 2 from their peak. They'd gotten 2 floor crossers. Those 2 seats, quite likely Liberal hold. I mean, they're both very safe Liberal ridings, and the Liberal Party is doing well. Terrebonne has been one that the Bloc has held more times than the Liberals, if I recall, so it could easily go against the Liberals, leaving them probably 171 when all the dust settles. But, maybe they'll luck out and get that Terrebonne one back and get up to the magic 173.
In the meantime, Mark Carney will continue to be Prime Minister, and, that means bringing forward ideas. The big idea he brought forward this week was the defense industrial strategy. People wanted a defense strategy. People wanted an industrial strategy. He just mashed them together and said, you want jobs? They're going to be arms industry jobs.
Yeah, so this had been in the works for a while. It was actually supposed to be announced the previous week, but events in Tumbler Ridge tragically took focus understandably away from this, and it got rescheduled to this week. But not before the embargoed copies had gone out and people had started talking about what was in there. But yeah, in short, the government is formalizing a model where, if possible, they'll build in Canada. If not, they will partner with other countries and companies outside Canada. And if that's not feasible, they'll just buy it off the shelf. In some ways, this is a big thing that they've finally formalized this. In others, it's kind of been the practice for a while. Like, a long and recurring criticism of Canadian defense procurement is that in a lot of cases it acts more as a jobs program for key ridings and regions than it does a how do we get the best kit to the military in a reasonable time at a decent price. So there has always been a push to do the build or partner approach in Canada before, but this formalizes it and in theory puts actual markers down on when they will do what. But the trick of this is always the discipline on not trying to push things a little more into the will create more jobs, even if it means the procurement goes sideways, costs more, and ends up coming in years late.
Yeah, so we'll see how much this turns into substance. They're hoping for 125,000 jobs to come out of this, which will make up for the jobs they're cutting from the public sector, I guess. Stop working for the government, go work for government military contractors instead.
Well, they're also increasing the size of the Canadian forces, so you could still stay working with the government. But yeah, it's reading through this. I mean, it's a strategy document at a high level, so there's a lot of kind of the buzzwordy stuff on there, which is not my favorite thing to read through, but like at least not uncommon in these strategy things. But I don't know, what I was being a little disappointed on there was there wasn't really much examination or discussion of where previous defense industrial works had not gone the way people had hoped. And like more importantly, why are we doing a defense industrial strategy before we put out a new defense strategy? Like, before you can figure out how you're going to be building stuff, like you kind of need to figure out the what.
Why?
Yeah, the why and the what on that. And like there's a submarine procurement going on right now where we're probably going to do a buy from the Germans or the South Koreans with some degree of industrial benefit in Canada, but we should be having the discussion on how many submarines we need, like what's actually required there, what are we trying to do. There's been a number batted around of 12, which we have 3 oceans. You need a submarine if you want a submarine in each ocean at all times, with maintenance and downtimes and everything that just mathematically works out to 12. But is that the actual goal we're trying to do? Like, we don't actually have that because there hasn't been the defense strategy put out yet that for probably the first time in 36 years or so since the end of the Cold War. Like, we really need to rethink this is how we're going to do defense. And that really should have been the predicate to this that is still kind of just vaguely hanging out there.
I've always said we could reach any arbitrary defense spending target per GDP by literally just digging a hole and throwing money in it, if we can call it part of our military.
Which is like the reason why you actually need to formalize this stuff a little more, because if you're going to be spending some percentage of GDP, you should get something valuable out of that, and we haven't always done a great job of that.
And that has been Politicos. Find links to everything we talked about at politicos.ca. Support the show and get access to our exclusive Slack channel at patreon.com/politicos. Our intro music is Beautiful British Columbia by Serge Plotnikov. Politicos is a production of Leg and Boot Media. Audio editing provided by Jesse Woodward at listener-supported CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo. Learn more at chly.ca.